Discover the amazing secret hidden below the surface. He was mocked, but a billionaire awaits. Ethan Smith had always felt the weight of his difference, an unrelenting pressure that squeezed tighter each day. At 22, fresh out of community college, he found himself standing in his late grandfather's dusty attic, sifting through memories while feeling utterly unmoored. Those cliques at school, the ones who grinned when they called him a nerd, hadn't magically vanished with his degree. Instead, their laughter echoed in his mind like a relentless drum, reminding him that dreams were the most punishing part of this small town. As he wiped soot from a leather-bound journal, the cover cracked open, revealing sketches of inventions that seemed to leap off the pages. His heart raced with excitement, but a voice inside protested. What's the point? For years, Ethan had poured himself into science and innovation, believing that knowledge could forge a path to a brighter future. Yet here he stood, caught in a battle of self-worth, stuck in a town that idolized sports over formulas. His parents clung to their dreams of stability, urging him to get a job instead of pursuing fanciful inventions. The familiar dread washed over him like a winter storm, a whirlwind of doubt and determination colliding in his chest. He felt torn, standing at a precipice, risk everything for the possibilities of his grandfather's legacy, or submit to the expectations that strained against his spirit. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Days passed and Ethan found mentorship in a local inventor, Mr. Harold, who had once captivated the town with his creations, but now was seen as a relic. In the cramped garage, Ethan felt something shift. The smell of grease and metal lingered in the air as he absorbed engineering principles and the relentless spirit of innovation. Yet tension simmered. Ross Avery, a businessman whose interests appeared to growl at Ethan's aspirations, loomed as a shadow in the background. That sensation in his gut tightened each time he imagined presenting something groundbreaking. Pressure built like a kettle about to scream steam, and with it came the doubt, a reminder of scorn and laughter sweeping through the halls of his past. As the project for the local innovation fair began to take shape, Ethan's grandmother dove in with stark realities, urging him to abandon lofty dreams. A stable job is hard to come by, Ethan. Her words sliced through him, creating an unyielding rift. Could he really push for this dream and risk disappointing her? Questions spiraled, anguish gnawed at his insides, and he felt the unyielding pull of family loyalty against the surge of his ambitions. The hours grew late, and tension crackled in the air as he stared into the depths of the journal, confronting a million conflicting emotions. Could he truly reclaim his grandfather's unrealized dreams, or would he default to the comfort of acceptance? As the looming fair approached, he stood on the edge of a decision that could redefine his existence. Would he honor his family's legacy, or become just another forgotten name, lost in the whispers of failure? The weight pressed against his chest as uncertainty settled like a thick fog, leaving him with one agonizing truth. Every choice bore the risk of loss, and tomorrow could be the day everything changed. Ethan's determination galvanized with each moment spent in Mr. Harold's garage. Each clang of metal echoed in his mind like a heartbeat, urging him to keep pushing forward. The pages of his grandfather's journal became both a roadmap and a mirror, illuminating paths he had never dared to explore. He began to sketch his own ideas, translating thoughts into lines and curves that crystallized into objects with purpose. The delicate balance between fear and hope stirred within him, but he clung to the visions of mechanics and innovation that seemed to dance just beyond his fingertips. Yet as the days turned into nights spent chiseling away at prototypes, the specter of Ross Avery loomed larger. Ross was known as the financier with the sharpest of eyes, and the mere thought of him critiquing Ethan's work made his stomach twist. One afternoon, as a stark sun illuminated the clutter in the garage, Ethan glanced at the City Hall's old building where Ross made his rounds. The equations of success and failure danced in his head, numbers clashing against the stark reality of his familial obligations. Would his pursuits ever be taken seriously in his small town? The looming fair whispered promises of validation, yet represented a far deeper chasm, one where he could either rise to greatness or fall into irrelevance. Ethan caught himself hesitating more frequently, When Mr. Harold asked him about his thoughts on their latest design adjustments, he remained silent, waiting for the older man to fill the void. The truth gnawed at him. He was afraid. Afraid of criticism, afraid of the outcome, afraid of disappointment. Something inside him knew he needed to confront this fear, to either bury it or let it fuel his creative fire. He recalled the ridicule, the laughter that haunted him. Each moment of silence was a concession to the past. One late afternoon, he decided to challenge himself. He invited Mr. Harold to critique his sketches directly. He felt a pit in his stomach as he laid them out on the workbench, the ink fresh and vulnerable. "Tell me what you think." His voice was steadier than he felt inside, but the anxiety crackled in the atmosphere. "Ethan," Mr. Harold began, his eyes narrowing with scrutiny. "You have something here. Each design shows promise, but you need to dig deeper. Don't chase perfection. Pursue impact. What problem are you solving? What's your unique angle?" Ethan processed the words, the very construct of his purpose fracturing and reforming in his mind. His fingers traced the outlines of the sketches, understanding dawning like the light breaking through clouds. He needed to reclaim the fire of his grandfather's dreams, but distill them into a vision that reflected who he was now. All at once he felt electrified, the gears within him shifting as children's laughter trailed down the street, taunting distances he had yet to overcome. Ideas began to blend as he stood there, marching possibilities as aspirations challenged weaknesses. He took a step back from his sketches, realizing the designs lacked humanity. They needed his essence, the conviction that came not just from knowledge but from personal passion. The next morning he rushed into the garage, sleeves rolled up and determination etched into his brow. He scrapped the half-finished prototypes and returned to the drawing board. This time, he poured his vulnerabilities into the lines, letting rawness infuse the designs alongside logic and mechanics. He was fighting against the shadow of his self-doubt and embracing the exhilarating taste of authenticity. But just as the momentum built, a sudden knock on the door interrupted his focus. It was Ross, his imposing figure silhouetted against the light. Perhaps this was the moment Ethan had anticipated, the confrontation that could either bring freedom or defeat. In the presence of impending judgment, Ethan's heart raced. Was he ready to face his greatest critic? Would he allow himself to be vulnerable when he had so much at stake? The air hummed with tension as both men locked eyes, the unspoken challenge echoing between them. The time had come for Ethan to confront more than just designs. It was time to confront the very essence of his worth. Ethan's pulse quickened, the commotion of uncertainty billowing around him as Ross stepped inside the garage. The once cozy space suddenly felt stifling, the clutter of tools and half-finished prototypes closing in. With Ross Avery standing there, clad in a crisp suit far removed from the grease-stained overalls Ethan wore, the shift in atmosphere was palpable. The wealthy financier was not merely a figure of skepticism. He represented everything Ethan feared: rejection, judgment, and exposure. "I didn't expect to find you here, Ethan," Ross said, his tone nonchalant, but with an undercurrent of scrutiny. "I hear you're quite the tinkerer now." Ethan swallowed hard, feeling the weight of reality press down on him. This was not the casual encounter he had idealized in his mind. "I've been working on some new designs. I wanted to create solutions that matter," he stated, his voice steadier than he felt. Ross stepped forward, his gaze piercing through Ethan like an unwelcome spotlight. "I'll be the judge of that. Show me what you've got." The challenge felt daunting, yet invigorating. As Ethan reached for the sketches in front of him, he noticed his hand trembling, revealing an underlying current of insecurities. He had put so much of himself into these designs, tangible representations of dreams and failures alike. Would they be dismissed as childish ideas? He laid the sketches on the workbench, each one a piece of his soul laid bare. "This is the first prototype," he began, pointing to a sleek mechanical arm. "But it's designed for a specific purpose, to help people during rehabilitation. It's adaptable, intuitive." Ross studied the drawings with a detached interest, his brow furrowing in concentration. The silence stretched uncomfortably between them, each second dilating under the tension. "It's a good start, Ethan, but you're still holding back. You need to answer the question no one wants to ask. What makes this stand out? Others have tried similar concepts." Ethan felt the ground shift beneath him. It wasn't simply about the mechanics, it was about the narrative, a story that humanized the metal and wires. The designs were his chance to bridge his past with his future, but the thought of inadequacy clawed at him. "I'm trying to blend functionality with empathy. he attempted, frustration rising. "I want to make a difference." "Then why not show it? Every line here is about solving problems. Yours. What do you want the world to see when they look at your work? You've got to portray that urgency." Ross's words struck at the core of Ethan's creative block. Ethan instinctively recoiled, his mind swirling. Critique was one thing, but the truth wrapped inside that critique was unsettling. "I'm still figuring out my voice," he admitted, his defense wavering. "I've only just started." "Exactly, which means it's ripe for transformation." Ross stepped back, a hint of a challenge gleaming in his eyes. "Fear will only hold you down. Don't give it power. I'm here to push you, test you if you have the mettle to continue. If you want to draw attention, real investments, you will have to be ready to flaunt the rawness of your ideas." For a brief moment, Ethan ignited with determination. The gale of doubt had stirred his ambitions, weaving into the fabric of his making. But then came the chilling realization. Was he truly prepared to expose his vulnerability? Would he risk failure? And if so, what would that mean not just for him, but for those for whom he designed? With a deep breath, he straightened up. "I'll make this work. It's time to elevate my designs." He looked up, eyes meeting Ross's. "You'll see that I can push beyond the surface." "Then let's see if you can back that promise," Ross replied, a spark of anticipation shimmering in his expression. "I want to know if you're not just dreaming but preparing to step into the reality of what could be." As Ross walked away, a new fire ignited within Ethan. No longer did he want to hide behind hesitation. It was time to step into the arena. But the storm of criticism still loomed on the horizon, and the thought of failure clouded his vision. What if he couldn't deliver? Would he remain the dreamer, faulted by fear? He had a choice to make, one that would determine whether he was just another tinkerer in a town or a visionary on the brink of transformation. But as he took his first step toward that path, the question echoed in his mind. Was he truly ready to expose himself? To fight against the echoes of his past, to grasp the future he longed for? The clock was ticking, and momentum was building. The moment was approaching when he'd have to decide just how much he was willing to risk for his dreams, not only for himself, but for those who believed in him without question. Ethan stood alone in the garage, each shadow from the tools and machinery now a reminder of the doubts he had long wrestled with. The weight of Ross's challenge reverberated through him, igniting an urgency he hadn't known he possessed. He reached for the sketches again, the ambitions drawn on paper suddenly exploding with possibility. Transformations were often born from discomfort, he realized. But was he prepared for the scrutiny that came with public ownership of those dreams? Ross's words echoed. "Show it." Ethan stared at the mechanical arm, a prototype that could potentially help countless people. Yet presenting it before the world felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, teetering on the brink of exposing not just his work, but his very self. The following days slipped by in a flurry of activity. Fueled by the fierce determination of proving himself, Ethan buried himself in the designs, refining every detail and incorporating feedback from colleagues and those he welcomed into his space. It wasn't merely about the mechanics anymore. It was about crafting a narrative that intertwined human experience with technological evolution. Through the lens of vulnerability, he uncovered a deeper layer of purpose. Each movement of the arm now embodied stories of hope and tenacity. He began to change his presentation style as well, swapping out vague technical jargon with emotional clarity. It was a gradual shift, a peeling back of layers. His workshop turned into an incubator for ideas that were no longer just functional, but alive with empathy. Each prototype told a story, not of machines, but of the people who would use them. The transformation felt electric, yet with every leap forward, there came an equally potent surge of self-doubt. Would this narrative resonate? Was he making something that truly mattered? Finally, the weight of anticipation surged into a decision. Ethan would submit his designs to a local innovation competition. This event promised exposure and potential funding, exactly what he needed to propel his ideas out of the captivating realm of sketches and into practical evolution. But the looming pressure, it was excruciating. As the days turned into hours, nights became endless brainstorming sessions where Ethan wrestled not only with ideas, but with the specter of failure. Anxiety clawed at him, taunting him with the haunting image of public humiliation if he faltered. "What if they laugh?" he murmured to himself late one night, the silence of the garage amplifying his fears. The thought bit deeper. Would he go down in history as just another failed idealist? But confronting those fears became a catalyst. In an almost frenetic state, he shifted gear, willing himself to see past the anticipated humiliation to the possibility of triumph. Each voice that echoed doubt in his mind was met with a stronger resolve. Motivated by a fierce desire to prove to Ross and everyone else that he could do this, Ethan melded innovation with personal stories he'd gleaned from conversations with would-be users of his prototypes. He envisioned presentations that were not just about technology, but hope and resilience. With the submission date approaching and his prototypes taking final shape, Ethan realized he was no longer the man whose fears held him back. The vulnerability he once dreaded became a strength, fueling his journey forward. He would celebrate not only innovation, but the heart of humanity that inspired each design. As he prepared his pitch deck, the adrenaline surged anew. He could practically feel the stakes rising, the thrill of possibility racing through his veins. But so too did the fear. What if the illusion he had constructed crumbled under scrutiny? The countdown to the competition loomed large in his mind, a critical juncture in his journey. Yet as he flipped through the final slides of his presentation, a new idea sparked within him, one that could shift the entire narrative. Was it too bold? The question lingered, hitting him with sharp clarity. Could one small adjustment take the pitch from good to groundbreaking? Ethan knew that answering it required more than sketching. He needed to step further into the arena of risk. And that was a step he was primed to take, ready to confront not just the competition but the storm of uncertainty surrounding it. With a deep breath, he prepared to unveil the unexpected twist, whatever the outcome, knowing he was finally ready to ignite the fire within and face the possibility of applause or abandon. In that moment, Ethan recognized that the real test lay not in the prototype itself but in his ability to transform that moment of vulnerability into an extraordinary declaration of who he had become. But as he stood poised on the brink of this significant moment, another realization surfaced. This competition was just the beginning. What awaited him beyond this arena? Would he risk everything again for the chance to turn his ideas into reality? Ethan's fingers drummed against the polished surface of his laptop, each tactile reverberation pulling him deeper into his thoughts. His pulse quickened as he reviewed the final elements of his pitch. The air felt thick with potential, but it was laced with the chilling uncertainty of those final hours leading to his presentation. All at once, it struck him. The emotional resonance he had cultivated needed to be more than just background. It had to command the focal narrative of his pitch. He toyed with the idea of integrating live testimonials. Instead of relying purely on statistics and empirical data to support his claims, why not have actual users, people whose lives could be transformed, express their hopes and journeys? This was no longer just about a prototype, it was a movement he was igniting. And yet, a flickering self-doubt threatened to extinguish his enthusiasm. What if the audience found these stories contrived? What if they perceived his attempt to connect as manipulative? Pushing those thoughts aside required immense fortitude, but there was a spark in him that wouldn't fade. Each encounter with potential users had shattered his previous notions of vulnerability, revealing their real struggles and aspirations. They believed in his vision, and now it was time he believed in it too. Days melded into sleepless nights, his garage transforming into a sanctuary where fear met relentless drive. Each prototype was not just metal and circuits, it was crafted with heartfelt purpose. The connection he felt with the dreamers he met ignited a fire within him, a yearning to communicate the essence of their experiences. He shifted his approach, layering emotional components into data that showcased not only the effectiveness of his invention, but its profound implications on human connection. With an hour to spare before he would deliver his presentation, Ethan felt the weight of the moment descend like a heavy mist. He had erected this intricate narrative in his mind, and now it was time to breathe life into it. The fear of mockery prickled at him again. The thought that the audience might be skeptical laid a dark veil over his resolve. He reflected on the journey, every mistake, every win, woven together like strands of a rope that now held him up. Was he truly ready to bear the deeper truths behind his vision? The thought of remaining cloaked in the shadows of self-doubt gnawed at him. In that moment, however, clarity pierced through the chaos. Those who had faced mockery for their dreams often ended up turning the laughter into applause. Ethan had to face the reality of his journey, the grit, determination, and awakening he had cultivated. With each breath, he reaffirmed the decision he had made earlier. Empathy at the core of technology could birth revolutionary changes. He envisioned the faces of people who stood behind him, lending courage to his voice. Lives transformed by connection were waiting for him to pull the curtain back and reveal their stories. And then another realization hit. This wasn't just a presentation. It was an unveiling of human spirit, wrapped within a framework of science and innovation. It was about resonance, and he had to trust his gut feeling that it would connect, regardless of the whispers of self-doubt. As he rolled through the final simulations, Ethan focused on the heartbeat of his message, instilling each slide with urgency and passion. The pre-presentation jitters transformed from paralyzing fear into a wild joy of anticipation. He stood at the threshold of exploration, a moment not merely to introduce a piece of technology, but to ignite dialogue on a human level. As he stepped onto the stage, the spotlight hit him like an electric surge. The audience watched in silence, curiosity evident in their gaze. He smiled, welcoming that silence as an opportunity rather than a threat. But before he could launch into the heart of his presentation, an unexpected figure emerged from the crowd, containing a presence that seemed to tower over the rest. Eyebrows arched and intrigue crackled through the air as Ethan's heart raced. Who was this unexpected visitor? What could this interruption mean for the stakes he was prepared to claim? The answer sat just beyond the immediate reception of the audience, an uncharted territory that promised to alter everything Ethan thought he understood about his endeavor. What awaited him now? Ethan's breath caught in his throat as he scanned the figure walking toward him. The crowd's murmurs faded into background noise, his focus narrowing on the newcomer, a man dressed in a tailored suit, exuding an air of authority and confidence that felt nearly intimidating. The sharp lines of his face hinted at a mind that had likely dissected countless pitches, each decision honed through experience. As the man approached the stage, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this was no ordinary interruption. "Mr. Caldwell," the man said, his voice smooth yet commanding, "I'm Jonathan Chase. I've been following your work for some time now, and I find it fascinating." The sincerity in Chase's eyes flickered momentarily, quickly replaced by a scrutinizing gaze. Ethan's heart raced, torn between precursory excitement and an immediate sense of inferiority. Was he about to be lambasted for his ideas, or was there something more? Every fiber in his being urged him to seize the moment, to engage in this unexpected dialogue, yet fear clutched at the corners of his mind. What did this billionaire want with him? Chase continued, "I believe there's immense potential in what you're presenting today. Beyond mere markets and statistics, it's about people, and you have a chance to get that message across." Each word was deliberate, striking a chord with the emotions Ethan had been assembling. Was this a chance to gain invaluable insight, or merely a prelude to heartache? With a quick nod from Chase, Ethan settled into the discourse, instinct pulling him forward despite every lingering hint of self-doubt. "Thank you," he replied cautiously, his voice steadier than he felt. "I've been trying to show how our technology can change lives, not just make them efficient." As he spoke, Ethan could feel the air pulsating with expectation. "Then let them feel it," Chase replied, leaning slightly forward. "Accompany your data with the visceral stories you've gathered. Don't just present, connect. You may have what they deem innovative in design, but if you fail to make them feel anything, you risk sinking into a sea of sameness. Remember, industry leaders thrive on narratives, on the emotional pulse driving decisions." There it was, the fork in his journey. The advice resonated deeply, clashing against the walls of the apprehension he had built. Ethan pondered the truth in those words. Could he truly shift the dynamic of his presentation? The testimonials he had considered, what if he elevated them further? What if he wove the essence he had felt with each encounter into this very moment against the backdrop of a relentless observer like Chase? As the inquiries began to bubble and the fear of judgment bled into open curiosity, Ethan found a newfound resolve. Then how do I cultivate that emotional experience? What does that look like in a room full of skeptics? He didn't hold back. Reaching for guidance was a step he previously feared. Chase's eyes sparkled with the thrill of intellectual challenge. Allow yourself to be raw. Share your own vulnerabilities. Don't shy away from how you felt during this journey. Your audience wants authenticity. They crave it. Ethan nodded, absorbing the weight of assurance that had begun forming. The spotlight, which moments ago felt like a heavy burden, now felt lighter, almost liberating. This was not just his moment. It could become theirs. Yet, the looming specter of doubt threatened to return. What if his openness was met with indifference? What if he bore his soul and was met with rejection? "There's that fear again," Chase observed, a knowing smile creeping onto his face. "That's what keeps many average, and it's a choice whether to embrace that fear or not. Your story, despite its flaws, can redefine your audience's expectations. Don't lose sight of that, Ethan. With each revelation, Ethan felt the layers of anxiety peeling away, exposing the raw ambition that lay beneath. He was prepared to wrestle with his vulnerabilities, to embrace discomfort as a vehicle for growth. The moment Chase took a step back, leaving Ethan at the edge of the stage once more, the crowd's gaze took on a new urgency. He could feel the anticipation crackling in the air, forcing him to confront the depths of his initiative. With newfound determination coursing through him, and memories of the stories that had shaped his vision flooding his mind, Ethan's voice steadied. Today isn't merely about what I've created. It's about why I created it. The stakes had risen unexpectedly, pulling him into uncharted waters, but in those depths lay the spark of innovation and connection. Was he ready to leap into the emotional abyss and trust in his vision? As he prepared to share his heart with those assembled, another thought surged violently forward. Would a single misstep now cost him the support he desperately needed? The audience leaned in, their faces now a blur of uncertainty and expectation, and for a fleeting moment, Ethan stood at a precipice. Could he overcome not just his fear, but the haunting specter of rejection that clung to him? Ethan took a deep breath, steadying himself against the onslaught of doubt that surged within him. He remembered the faces of those who had shared their stories, their triumphs, their struggles. Each anecdote was a thread woven into the fabric of his vision, his creation. If he didn't share that tapestry with passion, he risked letting those stories fade into the background, just another statistic lost in the noise. He stepped closer to the edge of the stage, taking in the crowd once more. There was a flicker of anxiety in their eyes, and he could almost hear the unvoiced question swirling in the air. What makes this different? Why should we care? What do you really want us to feel? Let me tell you about Lisa, he began, the name rolling off his tongue like an invocation. Lisa was a single mother working 3 jobs just to make ends meet. She had dreams of providing a better life for her son, and she reached out to our company for support, hoping our technology could help eliminate chaos from her life. As he spoke, he glanced at Jonathan Chase, whose expression remained attentive and encouraging. With each word, Ethan felt the shackles of fear loosening. He ventured deeper, painting a vivid picture of Lisa's struggle, the late nights, the shattered dreams, and the way she persevered through it all. She began to use our app, and within the first week, she could streamline her daily tasks from hours to mere minutes, Ethan continued. It gave her the time to focus on what truly mattered, spending quality moments with her son, enjoying the simple things in life. He could feel the audience shifting, nodding in understanding. The tension, once palpable, transformed into something softer. Curiosity, empathy. In that moment, he realized that Chase was right. Authenticity could forge connections deeper than any data set could convey. And it wasn't just about efficiency, Ethan pressed on, feeling the fire ignite within him. It was about restoring hope. Within 3 months, Lisa's life had transformed. She was offered a better job, one that didn't just pay the bills, but also provided an opportunity to grow. That's the power of what we've built. Ethan stepped back, allowing the weight of his words to settle over the crowd. The connection he sought was materializing. He saw sympathy, understanding, and even inspiration reflected in countless eyes. It was exhilarating, yet a part of him still bristled at the edges of vulnerability. What if they didn't resonate? What if Chase's optimism masked a cruel reality? The very thought sent a pang of dread spiraling through him. Yet the stakes were too high now. He had unlocked something vital. An industry couldn't just be swayed by graphs and tables. It needed stories that inspired action. His voice shook slightly as he kept going. I'm attempting to weave more narratives like Lisa's to show how technology and humanity can coexist. We're at a pivotal moment in the industry. Are we willing to become pioneers for change, or just another line in corporate history? The crowd remained unnervingly silent, their collective breath almost tangible, and for a fleeting moment, Ethan's nerve flickered. Would they embrace this raw truth? Or had he painted his portrait too boldly? Jonathan Chase stepped forward again, a slight smile breaking his composed demeanor. That's a compelling narrative, Ethan, he interjected, the audience's gaze shifting toward him. But what will you do about those who are resistant to change? Ethan's heart raced. Chase had thrown down a gauntlet. A challenge had been presented, not only to him, but to everyone in the room. With the stakes heightened, Ethan clenched his fists, drawing strength from the vulnerability he had just exposed. He recognized this as his moment to solidify that connection, to show he was not simply an innovator, but a leader ready to confront resistance head-on. "Change isn't easy. It raises questions that often go unanswered," he replied, allowing sincerity to guide him. "But if we don't push against the comfort zones of our industry, we remain stagnant. My aim is not to just gain followers, but to foster a community willing to explore, together." The words hung in the air, and Ethan could feel the audience weighing their response, processing the crux of his message. In that pivotal moment, he had shed a layer of fear, embracing a more profound calling, one of connection, courage, and authenticity. Yet the impending silence hinted at an undercurrent of lingering doubt, a question still spanning the room. Would his vision translate into actionable change, or merely sound like another hopeful dream? As Ethan stood there, the rhythm of open disclosure pulsating through him, he realized he was not just battling for acceptance, but wrestling for conviction, the conviction that his narrative could catalyze transformation. His heart raced, frustrated by whispers of uncertainty. What came next could either be an echo of triumph or the ghost of defeat. He steadied himself once more, blissfully unaware that a storm was brewing just outside those walls. What would be revealed when the crowd returned their verdict on his words? And in the face of potential harsh judgment, could he keep his resolve intact? With everything on the line, another question formed in the depths of his mind. Was he truly ready to face what came next? Ethan stood on the precipice of uncertainty, his earlier surge of bravery now tempered by the unsettling notion of judgment. The anticipation in the room was charged, but an unresolved tension lingered, a mixture of hope for acceptance and fear of rejection. He turned his gaze back to Jonathan Chase, seeking affirmation. Chase's expectant nod felt like a signal to push beyond the threshold he had just crossed. Ethan had stepped into a realm of unfiltered honesty, and he realized now was the time to pierce deeper. "Let's talk about fear," he said, his voice gaining momentum, each syllable laced with increasing certainty. "Fear of failure can often drown out innovation." Inhaling the sea of faces before him, he continued, "It's easier to ignore new possibilities when we are cocooned in familiarity. I too was once gripped by that fear, paralyzed, thinking I needed to have everything figured out." He paused, reflecting on his own past missteps, moments when he let insecurity dictate his decisions. The honesty stung, but it was liberating. He described his first attempts at entrepreneurship, incomplete ideas that never made it beyond his notebook. "I was so obsessed with crafting the perfect plan that I failed to progress. But then I began to confront that fear, taking small, messy steps forward. Innovation is rarely born from perfection. It flourishes in the chaotic dance of trial and error." A murmur rippled through the audience. He sensed them leaning closer, tension transforming into curiosity. And in that moment, a glimmer of something surprising emerged. He was beginning to see his struggle reflected in their faces. They were understanding. They too feared the unknown. "Let's be honest," he added boldly, "the industry thrives on risk. Each day companies either adapt or dissolve. Isn't it better to face the storm than to cower in the corner, waiting for it to pass?" Ethan's words flowed like currents, pushing against the wall of resistance. He was no longer merely recounting stories. He was inviting them into his internal dialogue, weaving in shared experiences that would ignite a collective resolve. His own shame and hesitation became rallying points for a call to action. "I stand before you, not as an infallible leader but as a fellow traveler," he declared, feeling an awakening within himself. Can we acknowledge that fear does not have to define us? In fact, it can be our greatest teacher. As he locked eyes with various members of the crowd, he saw their expression shift, from skepticism to contemplation, and slowly into something more. Had he finally sparked a connection? He considered Chase's earlier challenge. How would resistant individuals react to this candid revelation? Ethan committed himself to the idea that vulnerability could be a vehicle for change. It may take time, but the growth born from embracing our fears is where progress is found. Who is ready to step forward? His heart hammered against his chest as the words echoed in the charged room. There was no instantaneous wave of applause, no resounding endorsement. Rather, a contemplative silence cloaked the audience, a silence that felt heavier than uncertainty. And then a voice pierced through, breaking the stillness. "What if failure leads to more failure?" a woman questioned, her brow furrowed with genuine apprehension. "What if we fall and can't get up?" Ethan took in her concern. It was the question he had avoided, the doubt he had wrestled with long and hard. And what if that fall becomes a lesson? What if every stumble leads us closer to success? He answered, embracing the tension rather than shying away. The challenge had transformed into a dialogue, the audience feeling their fears mirrored in his vulnerability. As he navigated this new terrain of authenticity, Ethan recognized a pivotal truth. He was no longer simply pitching an idea, he was engaging in a shared journey of transformation. But as he stepped back, still processing the weight of their questions, a flicker of doubt sparked. Despite the connection forming, was he prepared to support this collective awakening with tangible solutions? The stakes had changed. A voice within whispered, "What happens when they demand action?" In that moment of reflection, Ethan wondered if he had sparked something greater than he anticipated, a movement of individuals willing to challenge fear and take risks. The real test loomed just around the corner, and he felt the burning commitment ignite within him. Could he rise to meet it? What awaited them on the other side of this hesitant push for change? The answer beckoned, tantalizing and terrifying all at once, an invitation to step into the unknown, not just for himself, but for those who were now looking to him for direction. Ethan stood with his back to the audience, heart racing as the silence punctured the air, heavy with unanswered questions. Doubt flickered in his mind like a faulty light bulb. Had he unlatched a door he couldn't close? Did he possess the keys to guide such a diverse collective towards their possible futures? He took a deep breath and turned slowly, letting the gravity of his statements hang, hoping the room would absorb them as a springboard rather than a precipice. I know what it's like to fear failure. I know the paralyzing grips of anxiety that keep dreams behind locked doors. He felt exposed, yet something within him flickered, a burgeoning fire fueled by the vulnerability he had shared. Let's explore those fears, he urged, scanning the audience. What do they truly want to achieve despite those rising tides of doubt? Hands began to rise, slowly at first, then with increasing enthusiasm. Each wave of raised hands resonated like a challenge. The stakes had already elevated beyond a mere presentation. Ethan pointed to a young man in the front row. What fear holds you back? The question punctuated the air like a drumbeat. The young man swallowed hard. The fear of not being taken seriously. How do I present my ideas when I doubt their value? By sharing them, Ethan replied, confidence now surging through him. You must lay them bare before the world. Each word is a seed. Some will flourish, others may die, but none will grow unless you plant them. The response felt right, igniting a ripple of connection with the young man. As others started to speak, Ethan realized he had tapped into something far more significant. Each shared fear defined a collective landscape of uncertainty, one that had remained tangled with silence for too long. These voices were not just echoes of his own, but were becoming a chorus of mutual resolve. The woman who had raised the initial question, her forehead still knit with concern, was now engaged. But what if nobody listens? What if our failures drown us in doubt? With determination, Ethan replied, "That fear is a part of the journey. It strengthens your purpose and engenders resilience. We cannot control how our ideas are perceived, but we can control the courage it takes to voice them." He saw nods and whispered agreements ripple through the crowd. Moreover, he felt his own resolve solidify. This isn't just about him anymore. It was about awakening a dormant courage within each of them. He had become the bridge they needed. "I challenge you all," he urged fervently, "to take one small step, today, toward a risk you've avoided. Reach out to someone, share your idea. Let it breathe a little, see what grows." The room vibrated with a contagious energy, and he yearned to keep this momentum alive. But then the bleak thought arose again. What if he couldn't sustain it? What if words without action became an empty promise? Ethan realized the urgency. He needed to direct this passion outward beyond the moment and craft an actionable plan. He couldn't merely stir emotions. He had to fuel them into purposeful channels. "Tomorrow," he declared, heart pounding, "I'll host a workshop, a space for every single one of you to bring your ideas, not just to share, but to transform them into tangible steps." A wave of murmurs followed, anticipation and skepticism mingling in the air. The clarion call of possibility echoed off the walls, but staring down the reality of executing a workshop warped the edges of his initial excitement. How would he structure it? Who would come? Through the noise of the crowd, Jonathan Chase's steady gaze anchored him. The reassuring presence of a mentor rekindled something essential in Ethan. It was time to confront this hallowed ground of fear, not with bravado, but with the earnest conviction to seek clarity amid the chaos. As he finally stepped back from the threshold, releasing the weight of shared vulnerability, Ethan found himself on a precipice of another kind. The response awaited him was a true test of not just his ability to inspire, but for him to embrace the very doubts he had so passionately deconstructed. With a steadied resolve, he realized there was only one way to find out what waited beneath the surface of these emerging desires. What if this workshop wasn't just a platform for ideas, but a summit of revelations for his own journey? Ethan stood on the stage of the Innovation Fair, his heart pounding with an exhilarating pulse of determination and acceptance. The audience had shifted from mere observers to participants in something far greater than just a pitch. They were witnesses to a collective awakening. Weeks earlier, he had been paralyzed by fear and doubt, but now he was ready to demonstrate the very essence of his journey, growth through vulnerability. He had transformed his prototypes into tangible narratives, stories that encapsulated not just the technology, but the dreams of the people who would use them. The successful pitch was not merely a high-stakes competition, but a launchpad for deeper connections. As he surveyed the audience, he noticed familiar faces, those who had shared their fears, desires, and aspirations with him. Their support coalesced around him, fueling a newfound confidence. Drawing deep within himself, Ethan began to speak. This project isn't solely about innovation. It's about resonance and emotional impact. Each line in the prototypes reflects human experiences, bringing to life the conversations I've had with you, the potential users. With clarity, he articulated how technology could enhance lives, not just by providing efficiency, but by embracing empathy as its backbone. He shared Lisa's story again, but this time he focused on the transformative power of connection. He emphasized how her journey inspired many others who faced similar struggles rooted in fear, doubt, and societal pressure. The audience sat transfixed as he painted a vivid picture of vulnerability leading to empowerment. With each word, Ethan felt the walls of skepticism surrounding him dissolve. "It is only when we embrace our fears that we truly innovate," he asserted, allowing the collective energy of his own journey to infuse the atmosphere. Failure isn't an endpoint. It serves as our finest teacher, guiding us toward uncharted territories of brilliance. As he wrapped up his presentation, he exhibited his prototypes with newfound pride, presenting them not just as inventions, but as testimonials of countless dreams distilled into workable solutions. The audience erupted into a storm of applause, not simply for the designs, but for the authenticity he had summoned so courageously. After the presentation, an unexpected wave of feedback from investors began to pour in, each expressing interest in his work and commitment to support his vision. Among them stood Jonathan Chase, who approached Ethan with an appreciative nod. "You demonstrated something powerful today," he remarked, his voice resonating with respect. "You've shown that vulnerability is strength. Let's make that vision a reality." The tide had turned. The billion-dollar question was no longer whether he would achieve recognition, but how far this newfound partnership would propel him. Killers of self-worth now transformed into catalysts for opportunity. He had elevated himself from the shadows of doubt to embrace a robust narrative of personal evolution. Days turned into weeks, and as projects initiated, he found himself in an established position, leading a team motivated by shared values of innovation and resilience. With each meeting, he witnessed the impact of their collective drive, fueled by stories echoing beyond prototypes. Each team member's contribution molded a culture ripe for creativity. They celebrated successes and analyzed failures precisely to learn and grow. Ethan marveled at how the very essence of his journey had come to fruition. No longer caught between fear and acceptance, he now stood with solid confidence and recognized competence within the world of innovation. The laughter that once haunted him became echoes of triumph as he turned skepticism into applause. In that moment, a dawning awareness settled deep inside him. His transformation was about more than technical advancement. It was about igniting hope. He had woven together a team that dared to dream, who, under his leadership, would dare to innovate boldly, addressing real-world needs. As he reflected on the path he had traversed, Ethan acknowledged how far he had come. Each challenge, once seen as a stumbling block, had morphed into building blocks that sculpted the person he was today. His family now understood and appreciated the pursuit of innovation, proud rather than doubtful of his aspirations. With the project heading into a public launch, Ethan felt a surge of fulfillment. This new venture wasn't simply a personal achievement. It was also an homage to the legacy of his grandfather and the dreams he had long nurtured. No longer bound by ridicule, he was rewriting the narrative around innovation, affirming that vulnerability could catalyze true change. As he stepped into the sunlight after the successful launch, a wave of gratitude washed over him. Ethan Smith had not only conquered his doubts, but also redefined success through authenticity. He felt a remarkable, unwavering sense of purpose fortifying the next phase of his journey. Now he stood ready to embrace whatever came next. No longer limited by fear, he was prepared to champion dreams, his and others, to change lives and build futures. To everyone following this remarkable journey, it's time to take action. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Every voice counts. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now, and remember, true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions. Don't wait even one more second to share.